Hey everybody, this is Oliver Joyce, and once again out here on the Great North Walk. A little older, a little grayer, and hopefully a little wiser. If you've only been watching my hiking videos, you've probably noticed I've aged a few years. It's probably been maybe a couple of years since I last did one, and the last hiking video I did was actually probably right at the start of Sword and Sandals 6, which is kind of crazy. Anyway, so join me for this series of little hiking videos I'm going to be putting out over the next couple of weeks. Each one will be about 10 minutes, 15 minutes long, just as I talk a little bit about game dev, a little bit about Swords and Sandals, a little bit about my next game, and, you know, just life in general. All right, let's get cracking. So, as we get started today, here on the Great North Walk in Sydney's northern suburbs, I'm in Thornleigh, and this is a beautiful track that's right near my house. You can see these amazing forest ferns everywhere. The first topic I want to get off my chest today is one that will probably be of most interest to people today, and that is Swords and Sandals, because of course it's what I'm best known for. Now, Swords and Sandals in particular, Swords and Sandals Immortals. And the question is, how did it all go? And I've sort of covered this in earlier videos, but I just want to kind of walk and give you a bit of a kind of a rolling stream of consciousness on, you know, how to actually deep down, how did I feel it go, and kind of, you know, what did I like, what did I not like. So I'm not really sure where we're going to end up in this little video, but hopefully if you're a fan of the game and a fan of the series, this will give you a bit more clarity on, you know, my thoughts on how the project has gone. So, Sword and Sandals Immortals started back in January of 2.5 years ago, so 2021, right? And I was in a position where I basically knew that it was time for a new game engine, a new Swords and Sandals, complete a proper sequel, because I'd done a bunch of spin-offs before that. We had Sword and Sandals Crusader, Sword and Sandals Pirates, Sword and Sandals Spartacus, and, you know, that all used the Sword and Sandals name, but they weren't the classic sort of combat game that people were really looking forward to playing, you know, the arena style game that has made the series well known. And I knew I needed to make a direct sequel to basically Sword and Sandals 3, because Sword and Sandals 4 and 5 had almost been, in their own way, kind of spin-offs, and one had been bunch of mini games with some combat, and 5 had the combat mixed with the dungeon crawling. So the whole premise of the game really needed to be a focus on combat, and particularly the classic 2D turn-based combat that you find in the very early Sword and Sandals games. If you go back to my earliest video talking about Sword and Sandals 6, it's probably the hike video from a couple of years ago, and, you know, I doubt you track it down, but in that video, it's my announcement video for the game, and when I go Sword and Sandals 6 VI, yeah, so in that video, I kind of talked about a pretty elaborate combat system for the game, and in my head, I'd kind of already increased the game's complexity kind of beyond what I needed. And so in that early video, I'm talking about this crazy combat system where you'd have like attack phases and defense phases and multiple movement points and sort of action points per turn, so you could maybe sort of string together like a move forward, jump, quick attack, and then maybe you could kind of go counter that with block, step back, jump, and it would almost sort of play out like a movie sequence. And I started to code that up, and I realized that that was too much. It was too much for how to explain it. It just, stringing too many moves together, it didn't feel fast-paced enough. I was hoping it would be this sort of beautiful dance, but it wasn't. It was a mess. And so quite quickly I realized that the major sort of unique hook of the game was gone, and because the version I'd made of it, I was sort of doing it, you know, attack, jump, and it wasn't working. It's really hard to explain why, but it just, when you prototype something up, you just kind of work out pretty quickly that's not going to fly. And my whole combat was built around that. And it's funny because originally I thought of a different game. I was thinking of making a different non-Swords and Sandals game. And I was going to do a martial arts game, and that was what I was kind of based on, with, you know, kick, punch, block, or jump, kick, block. And I still like that idea. I still wouldn't mind making some kind of Bruce Lee style, you know, Enter the Dragon combat game with the fighting like that, but it will be way faster paced than Sword and Sandals. And Sword and Sandals, as a turn-based game, it's weirdly leisurely. You know, you have your moves, but every move still plays out over a few seconds. And a martial arts game would have to be a lot faster than that. So I had to scrap that idea. And then I realized, okay, let's go back to the drawing board and let's just make it the best bits of the games of Sword and Sandals that people liked. So Sword and Sandals 2 was the most popular game, right? So I took a lot of the elements from that, and Sword and Sandals 3 was the second most popular in the series. And that was almost like the one that I sort of emulated the most, probably more 3 than 2. And this is one, okay, let's start talking about my thoughts on this. That's probably my first mistake, because really, looking back in my heart of hearts, I probably should have made it more like 2 in terms of scaling back that complexity even further, because 2 is the one that kind of just captured everyone. It's the one that I've struggled the most to recapture, even with the remakes and so on. But more on that in a little bit. So I originally thought, will I do the art for the game? And it's really hard to kind of draw the art and do the programming and so on, especially when you're by yourself. You know, I call myself a solo developer, and I am, but I do contract out a lot of the art. I do a lot of the UI art and everything myself. But if you really, you know, if you want to make things work, you got to be a little bit clever in how you do it. And so I knew I needed to find a good artist. So I did a bit of a search and narrowed it down, and eventually found a great artist called Bokimi. And he was really responsive and just super helpful, and he got the brief. And his art style was excellent. And the brief I gave him was actually a character from Sword and Sandals 3. And he, you know, he nailed it. And so the art style was kind of like a more detailed version of Sword and Sandals 3. And, you know, I love it. I think it's great. Not everyone loved it. Not everyone thought it was classic Sword and Sandals. But then no one else really draws like me. So, you know, and then for everyone that likes my drawing style, there's 10 that don't. You know what I mean? They say crappy flash art. So what can you do, right? So Bikini came on board, and I gave him the brief, and his art style was really good. However, the challenge was the animation, and I wasn't able to get the tools that I wanted in Godot. So Godot was the program I was using to write the game. I'd switched from Unity to Godot in 2021, and this was my first game in Godot. So you know, new programming language, new kind of game. There's all sorts of cool forest creatures around here. You can kind of hear everything from kookaburras to koalas, and no koalas actually. There probably are, but you know, usual Australian sort of creatures. But don't be surprised if something sort of jumps out at me along the way. Although no snakes, thankfully, because it's really cold. It's a really cold autumn morning here. It's 9th of May. Anyway, what was I talking about? Yeah, so the Godot engine just did not have a great plugin for skeletal animation. So that kind of like nice paper doll animation that you see in Flash and so on. I'm actually just going to jump over this little thing here. So let's hold on tight. Oh! +1 to agility. Still got it at my advanced age. So yeah, that was one of the major problems with Sword and Sandals Immortals, the animation. And I did all the animation, but I used this program called Spriter, and I don't know if it was just the pose that the character was done in, or the limitations of the software, which, you know, you don't want to blame the tools too much, because, you know, the old adage of poor workman blames his tools. I couldn't get Spine to work. Spine was the animation tool I really wanted, but Spriter was a poor substitute, and I just wasn't able to get the animations up to the quality of even the original Flash animations, because Flash is an amazing tool for doing animation. You know, it's no longer used for making games for the most part. Some brave hardy souls still do, but even I gave up on it a few years ago. And Godot is a great replacement in every aspect, but and now it works. Now it supports Spine properly. So if I go back and change things, I would have done it all in Spine and had smoother animations, and even been able to pay an animator to animate things properly. But because I do the animations myself, a lot of people complain about them. They say they're janky and stiff, and I get that. And you know, if I'd spent more time with them, maybe they would have been better, but I'm also trying to do everything as well. So, you know, it's doesn't always work like that. Where were we? We were talking about the animations in Sword and Sandals. Yeah, so that's one of the major issues that I personally have with the game. It doesn't stop the game from being fun or anything, but yeah, it is one of the barriers that people think, you know, the game's a bit jankier than it actually is. The next thing that I, you know, had to do with Sword and Sandals Immortals was make the game feel like a bigger game than it really was, because I wanted to charge more money for it and make it feel like more of a premium game. I wanted to be the biggest and the most grand Sword and Sandals I'd ever made. And to do that, I knew that the combat would have to be more deeper and have more systems and more skills and talents and so on. But that only gets you so far. I knew I needed to expand the world. So I wanted the characters to be able to move through the world and fight in different arenas and so on. So I kind of probably bit off way too much more than I could chew in terms of having 30-something arenas in the game, and I needed backgrounds for them and descriptions and adventures and so on. And that really, it added a lot to the workload of the game, if you know what I mean. And it definitely expanded out the time it took to make the game, and I don't know how much it added to the game, because there's a certain point where, you know, 12 different arenas is cool, even 20 is cool, but diminishing returns in terms of like 30, 40 people aren't going, wow, I'm so glad there's 40 arenas instead of 30, you know what I mean? And I wanted to have all the locations in Brandor so people could explore the whole Sword and Sandals world, but at some point you don't need that many, and that's a mistake on me. But and ultimately I thought of having all these different sort of arena rules and kind of way more than I ended up putting in there. I was hoping to have all these different traps and even sort of like high points and low points you could climb up and things like that, but it just ended up not being viable really, and so a lot of them I had to scrap, and certain things like the tag teams and you know, that especially I wish I hadn't put in, because it's kind of buggy and it doesn't really add that much. And it was one of the things that, a little bit of an experiment, and like I think in a future Sword and Sandals game I would love to have proper party-based combat, but for this one it was a bit of an afterthought and it didn't work that well. And it's still in the game. I left it in there because, you know, people seem to like it, even though it's not perfect. But things like the sort of first blood arenas, not only, you know, not allowing certain weapons and so on, I got a lot of complaints about those various arenas, even though like they only kind of appear now and again. Like you only get, you know, 3 instances of a certain type of arena in the whole game, but people complain about those even though they might spend a fraction of the time. Whatever the weakest link in your game is, just be aware that everyone's going to, you know, have something to complain about it. So here we are continuing along the Great North Walk now. We're going to go this way. Some more random thoughts on Sword and Sandals Immortals development. I was really happy with the amount of skills and talents and character classes and species and everything that I put in the game. I thought it was packed with flavor and variety and everything like that. And you know, it's one of those things that no matter how much you put in, people still want more, and people, you know, really kind of like dissect every skill and talent. And I owe a lot of thanks to the people in the Discord community, especially the Sword and Sandals Discord, for really kind of going through the game with a fine-tooth comb and just telling me what was working, what didn't work. There was so many patches I did for the game and balancing just based on their feedback, and I, you know, I'm really grateful to have that, you know, that dedicated fan base that was really so interested in the game that they wanted to do that. I probably went too far, I think, once again, in terms of it probably didn't need quite as much in terms of the detail and the skills and the talents and everything, because at some point, to be honest, I lost I lost how the game worked. I didn't know how certain skills worked, how synergies worked, what talents did what, because I'd start building them and it would be a year before I'd finish some others and I'd come back to them and people will ask me, how does this one work with this? And I'd be like, I don't know, I'm not sure. And that's one of the problems. Whoa, it's a whipbird, isn't that cool? One of the problems with developing a game, a RPG, a combat RPG with all these different skills and talents and synergies and things is you really want someone who's good at maths, or someone that's just only building that and not trying to build the rest of the game as well, because I'd put these things in there and go, oh, I'm sure that'll work, and then I'd have no idea until someone actually played it and told me, oh, that's not working, doesn't work with this doesn't make sense, or this is useless. So a lot of time was spent balancing the game, but you could never truly balance it because there were so many different systems trying to work together, and I feel like there was just maybe one too many, or two or three too many systems in there. You know, and there's something to be said about the simplicity of Swords and Sandals 2. People got a lot of mileage out of, you know, quite a simple system of, you know, there's only these many stats and you can use them how you will, and everyone gets the same power-ups and that kind of thing, and there's only a few spells and so on, but people didn't care. People loved that, and I don't know how much of that is nostalgia, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I think nostalgia is a big part of it, but also there's a lot to be said for not overcomplicating a game. And it's something that I've really been guilty of in the last bunch of games that I've made. I've overcomplicated the systems more than they needed to be. None more so than Immortals, I think. Immortals really had the most complicated combat you've ever seen, and, you know, the most complicated talents and skills and loot and everything, and I kind of hope that that's what the fans wanted. And people, you know, here's the thing though, the game is sitting at 700 at the moment, 712 reviews off the top of my head, checked this morning, and 88% positive, versus a game like Darkest Dungeon 2, which only just came out today as of recording, and that's got 79%, and that's mostly positive. So, you know, obviously that game's getting up with many more reviews than mine, but people like my game more than that. So it's really hard to make a game that everyone likes, you know what I mean? And I'm really happy with 88% positive. For a long time it was above 90% too, but you know, 700 reviews is pretty good, and you do see some games with thousands and thousands. They're the mega runaway hit games, but I'm pretty happy with 700 reviews, because that means a lot more sales than that as well, because only 1 in 100 or whatever it is people who actually buy a game will review it. It's quite a small percent. So getting back to the topic, what do I think about the game? I'm really proud of it. I'm really proud of Sword and Sandals. Well, that's knife glass, minus 2 hit points. I'm really proud of the game. I was kind of sick of it towards the end because it was the longest development I'd ever done. Another regret, I regret putting multiplayer in. It was originally, it was actually going to be the focus of the game originally, but then I thought, well, what if multiplayer doesn't succeed? Then the game will just be nothing. So I'm quite glad I did this. I was quite wisely so, in my Gandalf voice, I made multiplayer the secondary component of the game, and I really focused on that Starbound Gladiator campaign, you know, aka Swords and Sandals 6. And I'm glad I did that. I put most of the game's energies into single player, and you can kind of argue that, well, because you didn't put enough effort into multiplayer, it's self-fulfilling and people, you know, stayed away. You know, the reality is the great majority of multiplayer games, especially indie ones, are deserted very quickly. people don't give them a lot of time of day because everyone's busy playing Fortnite, or, you know, even Among Us. I don't even know if still plays that now, but most multiplayer games, the servers are deserted really quickly. And I probably made a few mistakes in just how multiplayer was set up, but I tried to make it as, you know, as simple as possible. And even with that, it just didn't hold everyone's interest enough, and there was a few dropouts. And, you know, honestly, you need a way bigger budget than I had to do it properly. I had myself and a guy who was contracted, who was doing a little bit of work on it, and a cool guy called Evan from Canada. Big shout out to you if you're watching, my friend. Thanks for working on the game. But realistically, it wasn't enough, just us two kind of banging away at it. And multiplayer, the thing is though, here's how I look at multiplayer. You can still get a game at any time. You can, as long as you go in there, wait a few minutes, and someone's going to show up. There's always a bot to fight, but if you want to play against your friend, you can always play against them. And that was the main thing I said. I was thinking, as long as you can play against, you know, your friend, as long as you both log in, then multiplayer is, for me, it served its purpose. It would have been cool to have thousands of players, but ultimately, there's only so much I can do, and that's in the public's hands. It never really took off, but then, as I said, most multiplayer games do. So again, multiplayer added another 3 or 4 months of development time, roughly, concurrent with everything else. But I don't think it ultimately delivered, you know, what everyone had hoped for. And so I kind of, in some ways, I regret putting it in there. But then I might not make another Sword and Sandals game. You just never know. And so I think it would be a shame to not at least have tried multiplayer from that respect. Right, time to focus and actually sum up my thoughts on Sword and Sandals Immortals properly after that half an hour of rambling and sidetracking. There's an old saying, you know, if you aim for the stars, you might still land on the moon, and that's okay. You know, paraphrasing. I think that's what happened to Sword and Sandals Immortals. It was ambitious, and it probably overreached a little bit and kind of got a little out of hand in terms of I didn't really understand the systems as well as I could have. But ultimately, I think it's the best Sword and Sandals game I ever made. I'm happy with it. The fans, for the most part, are happy with it. Sales have been good, if not incredible, and will continue to sell, I think, for the years to come. There's always a chance that I never make another Sword and Sandals game. This could be it. This could be the last one. You know, I always have, you know, new ideas to return to the world of Brandor, but in many ways I'm kind of, at least for now, I feel like arena combat is all played out. Thanks to my boy Isaac for the Pokemon water bottle. Much appreciated, my boy. And when I say played out, I mean in terms of 1v1 turn-based combat, there's not much else that I can really do or kind of want to do with it. You know, I've been doing Sword and Sandals combat stuff since 2005, 2006, and it's a long time. And, you know, people are asking about Sword and Sandals 7 already. There's no plans for Sword and Sandals 7. I don't have an idea for it. I would like to return to the world of Brandor with Constellation Mirror, and I'm going to talk about that in another video. But I have this kind of sneaking feeling that anything that I do with Sword and Sandals from here on in is never going to quite live up to the legacy of the past and the rose-colored nostalgia goggles. You know, people always tell me Sword and Sandals 2 is the best, and no matter what I do, I can't live up to that. And that's kind of cool. I mean, to have something that people still, you know, value so dearly, even though it's just a silly little flash game, is a great honor. And if I never did anything else, at least I made that. But it does make it hard to try to, you know, bring out anything new because you never quite, you know, satisfy everyone. So I'm looking forward to stepping away from the world of Sword and Sandals for a while. And I think, you know, as far as giving Sword and Sandals a send-off, this is it for now. And what a glorious send-off. And I'm really glad that Immortals turned out how it did. And for all the sort of grumbling I did earlier in this video, there are so many things I love about the game. I love the characters, the sounds, the voices, the little stories, even the mini adventures that not everyone loves. I like the fact that it's got cool dungeons in there. the variety of arena champions, being able to bring back classic champions, bring back new ones, you know, special guests in terms of, you know, people in the tag team fights with you. There's just a lot to like about the game if you're a fan of the series, and I think the combat is still fun. Even having spent 2.5 years on it, I still enjoy sitting down and having a game of it while I've been testing. I think that is testament to a well-built game. You know, ignore some of the reviews that tell you it's not a well-built game, because I think it is, and I'm the one that made it. Like, you try building a game, it's not easy. You never get everything right. You always will release a game that's got bugs one way or another. Look at Skyrim. Look at anything that Bethesda does. You look at that new game, Redfall. You know, they're always going to be... That's a bad example because my game is not Redfall. Even the best of games are released with bugs. You know, Nintendo's pretty good at not having buggy games, but if you're an indie developer, you're never going to catch them all, and you could spend your whole life trying to fix all the bugs in your game. And there's a case of diminishing returns. So, yeah, S&S Immortals. What a great ride. Thank you so much for being part of it. All the fans who've left me positive messages along the way and encouragement, and everyone that's finished the game and sent me screenshots from that last screen, you know the one. Everyone that played the good ending, the bad ending, everyone that died along the way in terms of, you know, not defeating the Starband Gladiator. Everyone that contributed to the game in terms of the, you know, the art, the extra flavor text, the writing, the bug hunting. My business partner Aram, again, this just sounds like an Oscars speech, but you know, it is basically a farewell to Sword and Sandals speech, because, you know, going forward we'll be talking about the new game and other things. So, you know, let's get this out of the way for a little while. Of course, my wife and kids for putting up with me the last couple of years. It was a great ride, and I am glad to leave the series where it is. And I do hope we return to the world of Brandor, but it won't be for a little while yet. All right, my friends, this has been All of the Joyce. Until next time, bye for now.